Thank you, Michael, and thanks to TASH for holding today's event. This is really such an incredibly important time for us to gather and to be in community. And I have to say, my heart is filled walking around this room, seeing so many longtime friends and colleagues. And it is such a privilege to be here honoring our community's longtime and stalwart champion, Senator Bob Casey. Since TASH asked me to give this keynote several months ago, I've been thinking really hard about what to say in this moment in time. And every time I think about how our community can navigate through these challenges and uncertainties, I keep coming back to our strengths. The first is our grit. Grit is the combination of two important things: focus and perseverance. It is having an unwavering focus on a clear long-term goal and then having the ferocious determination to work hard to reach it. It's about getting back up when you get knocked down. It's about seeing a roadblock and finding a way around it. It's a combination of passion and resiliency. And that's us. We have a clear North Star. A world where every person can live a self-determined life, where everyone is valued and fully included, and where all people can get the support they need to live the life they want. It's a bold and ambitious, but simple goal. And it's a goal that we've been collectively working on for more than 50 years. Our second strength is our broad view of advocacy. We're scrappy. We don't have a lot of resources, and we take advantage of every asset we have, using every tool in our toolbox to reach the goal. Longtime disability activist Bob Kafka describes this as the pitchfork approach to disability advocacy. First, we must engage in political advocacy, working with elected officials to advance and sometimes to defend our agenda. And that's, of course, where people like our champion, Senator Casey, comes in. We also have to engage in administrative advocacy, pushing federal and state officials who run and make the rules about programs that impact the lives of disabled people. And let me say, I've been on the receiving end many times in many roles of that administrative advocacy. Next is legal advocacy, using the courts to enforce our civil rights and hold entities accountable when they violate them. It can be an effective tool for big systems change, albeit a slow one. Direct action is a critical part of disability advocacy and culture, from civil disobedience to rallies and demonstrations to lift up the impact of policies on people. And finally, we must use the media to educate and sway the public on our issues. And in my view, I'll add a little addendum to Bob's pitchfork. In each of these advocacy strategies is coalition building. We must find people and communities who share our values and our common goals. That, of course, means working as a broad coalition of disability stakeholders, all types of disabilities, families, providers, and other allies. But it also means seeking out other communities and movements with shared goals: the aging community, the civil rights community, the labor movement, and more. We need to be at their tables to bring a disability lens, and we need them at ours to have a broader view. We need to show up for them if we want them to show up for us. In the best cases, we can work together on shared campaigns around our common goals. And I truly believe it is that combination of grit and our pitchfork advocacy that will help us navigate through the challenges and uncertainties ahead. Before I talk about the serious threats we face and share some advocacy strategies for fighting them, I want to take a step back and remind us of our progress. In talking to people today, it seems like today was heavy about where we are in this moment, and I have found the thing that helps me the most and centers me when I feel despair and hopelessness is thinking about what the world looked like when I first became part of the disability community more than 40 years ago. And I can unequivocally say we have come so far. When my brother Evan was born in the late 1970s, families like mine were told to place their children in institutions, where most disabled people were at the time. There was no such thing as home and community-based services. Disabled people were not part of schools, workplaces, or communities. But we, the collective, we knew there could be something different. And that's when we came up with our North Star and began working. And we've had some big advocacy wins on the path, creating the Home and Community-Based Services Program, passing the ADA, the Supreme Court's Olmstead decision, to name a few big ones. And even over the last several years, combining our advocacy with strong support from champions like Senator Casey, we've built on those gains, saving the Affordable Care Act, successfully advocating for funding during the COVID pandemic, getting powerful new updated Section 504 regulations from HHS. And in reaching each of those, we faced roadblocks. We had losses along the way, but every time we picked ourselves up, we regrouped, and we came up with a strategy to move ahead. So now when I turn to talk about the threats and what we can do about them, I just want everyone to remember, we can do hard things when we work together. It feels a little cliched to say, but we are in an unprecedented time. The threats of rollbacks are coming so swiftly from so many different places on so many issues. Earlier this year, I started a list of actions impacting disability rights. I worked with a student of mine, and yesterday she gave me a 40-page document, no joke. It is a long list and one that continues to grow. And I have personally worked very hard to not get overwhelmed and frozen with despair. Instead, I've had to really reshape my thinking to focus on the actions we can take and redefine what a win is under the circumstances. As civil rights leader Wade Henderson once said, there are times when progress can be measured by milestones, times when we struggle to move forward inch by inch, and times when we consider it a victory to hold the ground we have gained. Of course, we must continue to try to stop harmful policies and actions, but sadly, we've already seen it's not going to be possible every time. But our advocacy can still make a difference. We can throw sand in the gears because slowing down harmful things means less people get hurt. Our advocacy can help make absolutely horrendous policies less devastating. We can educate the public and document the impact of harmful policies and hold decision makers accountable. And we can focus on preserving what we can and thinking about how we build back in the future. And of course, we must continue to strengthen and broaden our coalitions and partnerships. And I would say we are already making a difference, and I want to give you a few concrete examples. One of our big wins in the last few years, and in my very slightly biased view, in the last several decades, was updating HHS's Section 504 regulations. And I want to call out that we have people from the Office for Civil Rights here and Department of Justice, and none of this would have happened without you all and your incredible work and advocacy. The regulations were driven by the insidious discrimination that became visible during the pandemic. And most importantly, they reflect what the community thought was critical. We added prohibitions prohibiting discrimination and medical treatment, requiring medical equipment, websites, and kiosks to be accessible, and codifying the Olmstead decision and subsequent case law and guidance. And then 17 states' attorney generals sued, seeking not only to enjoin the entirety of the 504 regulations, but to declare the Section 504 statute itself unconstitutional, threatening the very foundation of disability rights. And the community activated. Thousands, no joke, thousands of people lobbied their state AGs, pushing them to drop the suit or at least to drop the nuclear bomb claim. And because of our advocacy, the AGs did agree to drop the claim challenging the constitutionality of Section 504. And for the last 8 months, both the Trump administration and the AGs have agreed to pause the lawsuit while the administration considers its position on the regulations. Are we out of the clear? Absolutely not. It's very possible the administration might try to revoke or change the regulations, but we have neutralized the biggest threat and caused a delay, giving ourselves time to prepare for what might come next. The Trump administration has begun a major deregulatory effort directing agencies to rescind regulations that it deems burdensome, unnecessary, or illegal. The Department of Energy tried to roll back disability rights regulations, and yes, every agency has their own regs, including the Department of Energy, under the radar, using a rarely used tool called a final direct rule that automatically goes into effect. But the hitch with this is, if you get an adverse comment, you have to go back to the drawing board. And boy, did we get out people to give an adverse comment. In fact, 20,000 adverse comments. And because of that, the agency had to move back the effective date and review and respond to comments. Sand in the gears. This spring, HHS announced a complete reorganization, including the elimination of the Administration for Community Living, the one agency in the entire federal government focused on community living for people with disabilities and older adults. This was and is a huge blow. Leaked plans showed that HHS was going to split up ACL across 3 separate agencies and eliminate nearly 20 critical disability and aging programs, including the Protection and Advocacy Networks, DD councils, and the Long-Term Care Ombudsman. And again, we activated. And this time we used every single strategy in the pitchfork, engaging with HHS leadership, getting members of Congress to send oversight letters and hold hearings, using the media to show the impact of eliminating programs on real people. Even litigation was filed. And again, our advocacy made a difference. HHS now plans to keep all of ACL's disability and aging programs together. Even the president's budget reversed course on many of the proposed cuts, and the ones that he kept in, guess what? We now have a Senate and a House bill that said, no thank you, these disability and aging programs are pretty darn critical. Sadly, we weren't able to stop everything, including the termination of almost half of ACL's staff, but we have been able to preserve as much as possible, leaving open possibilities for rebuilding in the future. Finally, just one last example of how we are making a difference. And I know you're not going to believe me because I know there were panels about how hard and devastating and our biggest loss to date has been the passage of the Republicans' reconciliation bill with $1 trillion in cuts to Medicaid, the biggest cut in the program's 60-year history. But even within this loss, our advocacy made a difference. We truly put our heart and souls into advocating against this bill, highlighting that Medicaid is literally the difference between life and death for disabled people. We showed up. We told our stories in the media. We met with legislators. We held rallies, and even there was some impressive direct action. It is our advocacy that kept out of the Medicaid bill structural changes like block grants and per capita caps that would have had even more dramatic impacts and would have been nearly impossible to undo in the future. And everyone in this room is the reason why the vast majority of the public opposed cuts to Medicaid. And while this wasn't enough to stop the bill, it will be important as we hold people who supported this bill accountable in the next election. Okay, that's what we've done. I hope that's like, keep it up, guys. So what are the risks ahead and what can we do? Because anyone who knows me knows I am not going to get up here without telling people, this is what we got to do and here is your list. So here's a few priorities I suggest. The reconciliation bill has passed. And that means we now have to move from an incredible federal strategy to a 50-state strategy. Every single state is going to have critical decisions to make in how to implement Medicaid cuts. And we have to work together to protect home and community-based services. Yeah. We need to build strong local coalitions and use every strategy in the pitchfork, advocating with state legislators and agency officials, using the media to impact public opinion, holding rallies, and frankly, even considering litigation. We need to carefully document and share broadly what's happening. And we need to make sure we are out there refuting policymakers who are saying this bill, quote unquote, strengthens Medicaid for quote unquote vulnerable populations, because we have to build the momentum to undo these policies in the future. That's one. Two, we've worked really hard to get strong federal regulations over the last several years. HHS's Section 504 rules, DOJ's website and medical equipment accessibility rules, the Medicaid access rule, the settings rule, affordable housing rules, and more. And all of these could be at risk. I spent yesterday digging through the unified agenda that came out, and let me say, lots of disability on that list. So what am I asking you to do? Well, we have to flood agencies with public comments anytime there's an opportunity. Because even if our comments won't change what the agency ultimately does, it slows things down. Litigation may be a key strategy to consider. If agencies don't follow the required rulemaking process, then a judge may send them back to the drawing board. We also might be able to challenge changes as arbitrary and capricious or violating the law, and that's where your comments help us litigators build a record. Disability rights are civil rights, and there has been lightning speed efforts to roll back civil rights and reinterpret them to be a sword against the very people they were meant to protect. We need to be cognizant of the interconnectedness of our civil rights law. The ADA is based on 504. 504 is based on Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. And we need to think about how court decisions, even in a different law, can impact our laws. And that's why we need to work closely across the civil rights community. We need to be strategic, and we need to recognize that the judiciary has become more conservative and assess both the opportunities and, I think, equally and maybe even more important, the risks of litigation. I just want to give one quick example. This term, the Supreme Court heard a case related to Section 504 in the education context. I bet everybody heard it was a 9-0 win. Okay, it was a win, and we should celebrate that. But probably what you did not hear is that in the concurrence, 2 justices invited in the right case a consideration of whether Section 504 itself is constitutional. We cannot give them that opportunity. Coalition building, I have highlighted it again and again, but now is the time to broaden our tent and build stronger partnerships with others. The challenges are big, and we are stronger when we work together. And finally, we need to defend while we simultaneously are thinking about how we build back. We cannot build back to the imperfect systems that we had. Now is the time for us to work on the ideas for the systems we really need. And that is the perfect segue to talk about our dear friend, Senator Casey. For nearly 20 years, Senator Casey has been our community's champion. He came to the Senate with a deep commitment to social justice and the economic security of everyday Americans. And of course, those values align completely with disability rights. When he was asked by retiring Senator Harkin and the disability community to pick up the mantle, he didn't hesitate. And boy, has he carried that mantle. For nearly 2 decades, Senator Casey played a role or led virtually every single piece of disability-related legislation. He believes deeply in the economic security of disabled people and in the value of work. And in a bipartisan fashion, he helped pass the Achieve a Better Life Experience or ABLE Act, establishing ABLE accounts to make it possible for disabled people to save without jeopardizing eligibility for benefits like Medicaid. Okay, but he didn't stop there, okay? This is the embodiment of grit. He spent the next 8 years working to pass follow-up legislation to expand ABLE accounts to people with disabilities who had an onset before age 46 instead of 26. So helping us that inch by inch and making it broader. He knows that people with disabilities can and want to work real jobs at real pay alongside coworkers without disabilities. And he worked with the community and with Republicans and Democrats across Congress to advance the Transformation to Competitive Integrated Employment Act, to expand opportunities for competitive integrated employment, and end the outdated 14C program that allows disabled people to be paid sub-minimum wages. He's recognized that people with disabilities and older adults are particularly at risk during disasters, yet too often are not considered in planning, response, and recovery. And he led so many bills, including the Ready for Disasters Act and getting aging and disability are trying embedded in the Pandemic All Hazards Preparedness Act. And most significantly, he has been the champion, I'd venture to say the most important champion ever around community living. Literally every single bill to expand and strengthen home and community-based services in the last 2 decades was driven by Senator Casey. He has introduced big idea bills like the HCBS Access Act, which would reverse Medicaid's longstanding institutional bias and eliminate waiting lists. This is a bill that sets a clear vision of where we need to go. He's recognized the importance in HCBS of addressing the direct care workforce crisis, introducing bills like the Better Care, Better Jobs Act. And he knows that supporting family caregivers who often step in due to a lack of access to home and community-based services is critical, leading the RAISE Family Caregiver Act that led to the first ever national strategy. During the pandemic, it was because of Senator Casey when we saw our system completely falling apart and people ending up in institutions where literally they were dying. And Senator Casey, after the first 3 bills, despite our advocacy, left us out. He was the reason that we were in the American Rescue Plan, the largest investment ever, $37 billion at the most critical time for our systems. And he brought that same determined advocacy to the engagement around the Build Back Better bill. And kind of the story around the Hill is Senator Casey, at every single meeting with the Democrats about this bill, would come in and say, don't forget home and community-based services. And really, it is because of Senator Casey, we were devastated, of course, that the bill and the provisions around care did not pass, But you, Senator Casey, have set the trajectory to make sure that disability and aging are part of the care agenda, and that is huge. That's just a small sampling of the incredibly important bills that he championed, but it's not actually what Senator Casey did, but how he did it that I want to talk about. For most of the time that he was in the Senate, he was on the Senate Aging Committee and had the privilege of serving as the chair for 4 years and ranking member for another 4. And he recognized this commonality across aging and disability. The desire to live in one's own community instead of in a nursing home or other institution, the intersections between ableism and ageism, priorities around accessible housing and transportation, and more. And seeing that there was no similar committee for disability, well, he grabbed the bulls by the horn, as they say, and decided to expand the jurisdiction of the Senate Aging Committee to consider both aging and disability. And his work on Senate aging was unparalleled. I want to kind of give a shout out to that back corner where I see a lot of his Senate aging crew. Like, thank you for amazing. I know behind every great person is a great team. And he used the Senate Aging Committee and that platform to educate colleagues, create visibility, and rally the community. And he always made sure people were at the center of everything he did. Other people would hold panels with quote-unquote experts, and Senator Casey always knew who the experts were, people with lived experience. And that's why every hearing, including even a hearing for a U.S. Supreme Court justice that he helped shape, had disabled people as part of it. And I went back and listened to Senator Casey's last hearing, entitled Empowering People with Disabilities to Live, Work, and Thrive. And I encourage people to go back and look at it, because you know what it was? It was people with disabilities themselves sharing how far we've come and what we have left. And on a personal note, I really want to thank Senator Casey for his incredible support, for the Administration for Community Living, and you used that platform to support those programs in incredible ways. Just want to say he's been this incredible partner with the community, and you have helped us hone our strengths. I will never forget a meeting he held with folks from the community the day before the fated vote on the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. We all had fought so hard, and we didn't know, actually, that Senator McCain would have this incredible courage. We pretty much were under the working assumption, and I think you pulled us together to give us a pep talk. And what you did that day to all of us, we were just heartbroken. You pulled us together to say thank you. You pulled us together to say, okay, I'll give you 1 day, and then you got to get back up and start fighting. And that is who Senator Casey is. It's incredible. This is grit. And this is the way he believes in the power of the collective. He has not only facilitated people working together across disability, aging, and labor, but you demanded it of us, in your very nice and kind way, of course. When you saw infighting or groups retreating into their silos, you'd get Michael to call us all together for a meeting, and you'd remind everyone of our shared goals and that we can only reach them when we work together. You always, always, always remind us to focus on our North Star, and I can unequivocally say that because of Senator Casey, we are so much further along to reaching it. Senator Casey, you helped prepare us for this moment, and we are continuing to look to you. To everyone in this room, this is not a time for despair or hopelessness. It's a time for action. It's a time to work together in coalition. We need to bring our communities together, and we cannot retreat into our own corners to fight for our own funding or our own programs. We need to show up for each other. It's a time for us to be strategic, and we have to use every single tool in our toolbox to both work on preventing rollbacks and harm, and at the same time, developing those big ideas for a better system, because there will be a time on the other side. The pendulum always swings, and we need to be ready when the politically impossible becomes the politically inevitable. I want to end by saying one last time, we can do hard things when we work together. Thank you so much, Senator Casey, for your leadership, and thank you to everyone in this room for your hard work and what you're going to keep on doing. Thank you.